Is drinking raw milk safe like RFK Jr. suggests? Can you reduce a glucose spike if you eat your food in, quote unquote, the right order? I'm registered dietitian Abby Sharp. I host a nutrition myth-busting podcast called Bite Back with Abby Sharp, and those are just some of the questions I tackle with qualified experts on my show. There is so much food misinformation and disinformation out there, and it can feel impossible to know what's real and what's BS. On Bite Back, my goal is to help listeners create a pleasurable relationship with food, their body, and themselves, which in my opinion is the fundamental secret to good health. Listen to Bite Back wherever you get your podcasts.
Paperback writer.
The sounds of the Beatles. And that one, the name of the song was said multiple times in that brief bit of the song we just got to hear. So you know it's Paperback Writer. How about the fact, though, that on this day in 1966, Paperback Writer became the 10th consecutive number one single in the UK for the Beatles. 10 in a row. Paperback Writer goes to number one. 10 consecutive number one singles for the Beatles on the UK charts this day in 1966. This day in 2025 is a scorcher, that's for sure. Monday, the 23rd of June. Welcome to the program. Thank you very much for stopping by. Spending some of your time with us. You know that the minute we begin the show every day, our phone lines are open. 519-570-2545, star 570, 1-800-570-5715. You can also get in touch with us electronically. The email address is a simple one, mike@570news.com. That's where Cindy sends me an email and is curious about, you guessed it, those speed cameras. Good morning, Mike. We were driving on Fisher Holman by Forest Heights Collegiate, where the speed limit drops to 40 kilometers per hour, 24/7. A police vehicle passed us earlier on Fisher Holman, and our observation was that this vehicle did not slow down to the posted speed limit. The vehicle had no lights or sirens activated, nor did he pull over other vehicles going over the limit. Two questions here. Maybe you could ask the chief when he's on next. Why does this vehicle not have to abide by the speed limit sign? As we know, the region is planning to install a speed camera in this section. If caught on photo radar, who pays for those tickets? I sure hope it's not me as a taxpayer. To the second question, I do believe, Cynthia, that it is you. I don't think the officer individually pays the ticket. I could be mistaken on that. But they are supposed to adhere to the posted speed limits. Maybe that's just another reminder that the arbitrary nature of the speed limit changes and the 24/7, 365 enforcement is maybe not in the best interests of drivers. It's in the best interests, of course, of the coffers at regional headquarters that will be filled and filled and filled. By the way, turns out about 1 in 20 of the tickets issued in Wellington County, where they've reaped millions of dollars already this year in speed camera fines, 1 in 20 are being challenged in court. I don't know how successful those challenges will be, if at all, but about 5% of the people receiving the tickets are challenging them in court. You can do like Cynthia did, send emails to mike@570news.com. You'll find our Facebook page at The Mike Farwell Show, and you'll find me on X or Instagram at Farwell_WR. conversations are so much more entertaining when they are two-way. But you're welcome to just passively listen as well, like we do for the Farwell 5 every day. What have I got for you today in the Farwell 5? Well, at number 1, we are into record-setting warmth in Waterloo region. Yesterday's high of 33 degrees broke a 102-year-old weather record. Today's high of 36 will bring us within 1 degree of being the hottest June day ever. We reached 36.7 back in 1944. Number 2, the investigation continues into a weekend shooting in Kitchener. Police say shots were reportedly fired during a break-in at a home on Breckenridge Drive, which is in the Stanley Park area. A subsequent chase led to the expressway where more shots were reportedly fired. 2 people have received minor injuries, and the search for 3 suspects continues. Number 3 on your Farwell Show 5 this morning, the owner of a former grocery store has been fined for not paying employees. Michael Renkema, who operated Dutchie's Fresh Market, had shorted his employees almost $36,000 during a difficult financial time. He's been fined a total of $32,500. Renkema also has made good on the unpaid wages. Number 4, the head of the United Nations nuclear watchdog says he expects there to be heavy damage at Iran's Fordo facility after Sunday's U.S. airstrike using sophisticated bunker buster bombs. Rafael Grossi says very significant damage is expected given the explosive payload utilized in the strikes. This comes as the Israeli military says it hit Iranian government targets in Tehran today, along with strikes on roads around the Fordo enrichment facility to block access to it. And number 5 on your Farwell Show 5 this morning, a Guelph church honored the farmerettes this weekend. St. Andrew's Presbyterian in the Royal City held a special service yesterday to celebrate the women who made sure crops were harvested during the world wars while men were away fighting. Guelph's Betty Lou Clark and Gloria Carter, along with Jean Collier of Fergus, were among the farmerettes in attendance for yesterday's special service. And that is your Farwell Show 5 for this Monday morning. We'll take a quick break. Your morning wake-up call on the way. And are we waking up to World War III? We'll talk about it coming up. This is the Mike Farwell Show, 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. Just so we're all on the same page as far as this story is concerned, he said he was going to end the war between Russia and Ukraine and Hamas and Israel virtually immediately after taking office. And he's also been critical, and for some time, of the so-called forever wars that the United States has involved itself in. But as the war between Russia and Ukraine rages on, as does the conflict in the Middle East between Israel and Hamas, U.S. President Donald Trump engaged the United States in what could be characterized as a forever war.
Tonight I can report to the world that the strikes were a spectacular military success. Iran's key nuclear enrichment facilities have been completely and totally obliterated.
It's not about regime change, though, said Donald Trump on social media, although he thinks there's a way to make Iran great again. Nonetheless, it certainly augurs something that is a little bit ominous, isn't it? I mean, doesn't it feel like there is a great deal of unrest out there? World War III might be a stretch, but there are tensions that we have not seen in quite some time on a global scale. Let's go to the phones here from you. Paul, good morning.
Morning. How you doing?
I'm all right, thanks. How are you?
Oh, still vertical. You know, Sunday morning I got up a little early because I'd watched the bit of the news on Saturday night and wanted to see if World War III had started. I'm not sure. We'll give it a couple of days to see how Iran retaliates. But just out of curiosity, I went online and I checked the things like Fox News, CNN, BBC, Al Jazeera, and of course everybody's got a different opinion on what happened there and whether or not it was justified. But I listened to the news this morning. It sounds like World War III is starting out in Kitchener, where shots fired all over the city over the weekend. The question for you, a simple yes or no answer will be just fine. If the victim was an innocent victim, a legal, law-abiding citizen, and he was a firearms owner, should he have fired back?
Sorry,
yes or no?
Should he have? I missed I missed the last part of what you said.
Fired during an armed
break-in.
invasion.
Yeah.
Should he have fired back if he was a legal, licensed firearm owner and was not anything to do with any sort of criminal? He was just an innocent victim. Should he be allowed to shoot back?
Yeah, it's a great question, Paul, and one that's actually been on my mind as well, because we talked about it quite a bit on the show last week, this so-called castle law as exists in the United States. And I thought of that very thing because what happened here, and we don't know what the confrontation really was, but there was a break-in at a home, and when the owner confronted the people breaking in, and that just might mean, I don't know, he or she was awakened, and we don't know what transpired there, but then the people breaking in fired shots. And I thought to myself, boy, isn't that exactly the opposite of what we want, right? Because when you engage in that confrontation, you don't know if the other person has a firearm. And if they have a firearm and you have a firearm, well, then goodness gracious me. I think
here's a question for you.
So I guess my answer would be no, by the way.
You don't think that the legal firearms owner should fire back if somebody breaks into their house?
Well, fire back or fire first? And I'll just take it a step further. You know firearms regulations even better than I do, but if you are a legal firearms owner and you follow all of the rules, good luck getting to your firearm in time.
Oh, not necessarily, because...
Well, it has to be stored. Access. The ammunition has to be separate. How are you going to do that while somebody is firing at you?
Right, but there are quick access firearm safes designed just for that purpose, biometrics and, a variety of things like that. There was a firearms lawyer was discussing this online to some extent. We still don't know exactly what happened in Toronto. They say the victim, has been charged with various firearms offenses.
This is when the suspects were trying to steal his car.
Yeah. Now, they're not releasing very much information because he may have been a completely legal firearms owner.
But we know it's not legal to just discharge a firearm in the city.
Agreed on that.
Okay.
However,
so that's why he would have been charged,
It has been established in case law that a warning shot fired in a safe direction is an acceptable practice.
But we can understand why he's been charged, right? And then we can let the courts figure it out, I suppose.
Charges, like charged with possession of a prohibited firearm. I have prohibited firearms. They're under an amnesty. They have to stay in the safe. They're locked up, they're secured, dismantled, unloaded, the whole bit.
But if you took them out and fired even a warning shot, you recognize then that you would be chargeable.
Exactly.
Okay.
Even though he may have been a legal firearms owner because he took it out of the safe.
Right.
And that, if there's two guns there and he grabs the most convenient, the most accurate, the most suitable one instead of the old shotgun, they do not release the information because they don't want people getting this idea that they can defend themselves. And this is just getting ridiculous.
Well, listen.
How many other shots were fired after they left the house?
There were more apparently on the expressway. I get you. And listen, I got to get to a break.
Who are they shooting at?
I don't know. The investigation is ongoing, Paul. The details will come out in due time, I'm sure.
Do you think it was Joe Smith and who knows what that was doing the shooting?
You mean Paul from Preston and Mike Farwell? No, I don't think we were doing the shooting.
Was it us two, or were the? Let me put it this way:
Paul,
would the names be unpronounceable?
Come on now, stop that! Stop that! I'll stop that. Oh my goodness! But these are the two things that are on my mind this morning as well. It's like Paul and I are of like mind, at least up until the very end there. I felt like maybe yesterday when I got up and turned on the news that World War III had possibly begun. And how do we feel today about a castle law when there's a homeowner in Kitchener that confronts people breaking in, and in response, those breaking in allegedly fire shots at the homeowner? I understand wanting to protect your stuff, your property, the people that you love. And this can be the outcome of that. Oh boy, the timing couldn't have been more coinkydink based on what we talked about last week. This is the Mike Farwell Show, 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. Just ahead of our 9:30 update in the 570 News Center, gotta give a huge shout out. The virtual ovation. Can you do an ovation of one? But I gotta hand it to the folks who turned out in great number, well over 100 yesterday at the University of Waterloo, to take part in the annual Walk to End ALS. I give the credit and the praise because, of course, we know that yesterday's weather was not exactly the most conducive to be out walking around and moving about in such extreme weather conditions, but 100 plus did just that, and in the process raised more than $113,000 locally at the Walk to End ALS. I was privileged to have been asked to act as MC for the event yesterday, and it was an enthusiastic bunch that did not lose their enthusiasm despite the weather conditions. And as I said, ended up raising more than $113,000. And overall, that was the local walk, $113,000 plus. Across Ontario, the ALS Society of Canada says they're just shy, and they think as the final numbers come in, they will surpass their stated goal of $2 million. They were at $1.96 million raised across the province when we wrapped things up yesterday at the University of Waterloo. So just $40,000 away, but $113,000 raised at the local Walk to End ALS yesterday on a day upon which I think many would have rather just stayed home, hung out in the basement, stayed cool some way, somehow, whatever the case may be. But it was a great show of community support. A number of our local dignitaries were there to offer support as well. But it really comes down to the people who come together in a manner like that to do something that is meaningful to them and raise those important funds. So kudos to each and every one of you who braved the elements, so to speak, and got out there yesterday to take part in the annual Walk to End ALS. As I mentioned, an update from the 570 News Center is coming right up. And then let's talk about Bill 5, but not Bill 5 here in Ontario, Bill 5 in Ottawa, the federal Bill 5, which is similar in nature to the provincial Bill 5. It promises, the federal bill, to fast-track projects that are in the interests of nation building. But will Indigenous communities be brought along through necessary and important consultation? Let's talk about it coming up on the Mike Farwell Show, 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. The federal government passed on Friday Bill C-5, which will make way for the quick movement of nation-building projects. The Prime Minister Carney has made it clear, and with the support of Conservatives in our House of Commons, he would like to get nation-building projects underway, and he would like to move at a very fast pace. There were concerns about Bill 5 moving into Friday's discussions in Ottawa, and Prime Minister Carney made it clear that there will be meaningful and formal consultations over the summer to address any concerns from Indigenous communities. Martina Palahimo is a PhD candidate at Queen's University in the Department of Geography and Planning, joins the conversation. Martina, good morning.
Hi, good morning. Thanks for having me.
Thank you very much for making the time. We're also joined by Lawrence Martin, who's the Director of Lands and Resources at the Mushkegowuk Council. Lawrence, good morning to you.
Hey, good morning, Mike. How are you?
I'm well, thank you. How are you?
I'm good. It's raining and storming up here in Timmins, Ontario, but we can handle it.
Of course you can. You're from Timmins. Yeah, I understand. You're tough up there. You're made from different stuff. Lawrence, if I can start with you, just alluding to what I mentioned from the Prime Minister and his words on Friday as Bill 5 passed. Do you have confidence that these formal summits and consultations can happen over the course of this summer?
I really want to feel that I have confidence in what's been promised thus far. But then again, I come from a background and from the people that have been promised many different things for the last 150 years or so. But I'm still optimistic and trying to look at the positive aspects of this new promise for consultation and to hopefully some participation and some of these national projects that the Prime Minister is talking about. And certainly in our territory, we know from the past that we have all kinds of resources available, like critical minerals, and we have hydro projects that are, some of them are already on the go, and there's still more to be done. And we live in an area where we have the second largest carbon sink in the world, and we have the James Bay and Hudson Bay, and there's talk about having seaports in these bays and so forth. So we're optimistic that, that the opportunity might come from the government for us to actually sit down and talk about how we can work at these together. And I think that's going to be the important part, how we work at these together.
What would meaningful consultation look like, Lawrence?
I've been involved in a particular conservation project trying to establish a national marine conservation in James Bay and Hudson Bay for the last 3 years. And we've been doing consultations quite regularly into all the 9 communities actually, because we incorporated a couple of additional ones up in Winnisk and Fort Severn. And meaningful consultations means you have to be there quite a bit. You have to be able to speak in the language of the people. You have to be able to provide enough information where they feel the distrust that's been there for such a long time will, change, and that it'll be a positive relationship. Even with the conservation project, it's supposed to be Indigenous-led, and the people are saying this is how we want to do it. But even with that, the federal government is not really in a position to change their regulations or policies at this time to be able to allow that to happen the way that people want to do it. So it could be the same thing here. It's going to take a little bit of time to get it done, to talk to the people. I would say, a good couple of years, but we're looking at only a summer to be able to do something like this in this case.
Martina, that kind of ties into something else I've been thinking about, and perhaps with your expertise you can shed more light on it, but that is the timeline and the rather aggressive timelines that Prime Minister Carney has set to accomplish these nation-building goals. Do you think this is a realistic timeline?
I think a lot of the complaints that have been coming out is there's just not enough time been spent consulting, and then also going further enough to also include the rights guaranteed by UNDRIP, the United Nations Declaration of Indigenous People, to include free, prior, informed consent. So I think there needs to be more time, and what Lawrence was saying, spent in community to be able to lead and center the rights of Indigenous people in these projects. So I think it's important to think about how we advance these across the country, but also taking the time to consult and make sure that this bill is done right is really important.
Why, Martina, are these consultations so important for the federal government to undertake? One, it's enshrined in the Constitution, but it's also it's a meaningful consultation. So it's also going, not just consultation because there's no standardized process,
So I think that's where some of the worries actually coming out, that not knowing exactly what consultation means. And so there's no guarantee that projects, if a community doesn't want a project or it doesn't respect their rights or put like benefits to the community or have environmental protections, there's no guarantee through the consultation process what that's going to look like for communities. So just trying to think about including consent in that as well, FPIC, free, prior, informed consent.
Lawrence, you alluded to this earlier, and I'm wondering if there is an opportunity here for Indigenous communities across this country to realize perhaps some economic benefits from these projects and play a meaningful role in their development.
I totally agree with that possibility being there. And many of our communities are already involved in resource development, and we can see the benefits that they're able to get from that. So I think, communities that are isolated from the rest of society, the ones that don't have road access and living in very expensive places, those are the ones that we really need to see how can they participate in some of our communities. Half of our communities are only serviced by a winter road or by plane. So it's hard for them to see themselves in participation. So we have to be able to acknowledge that as we move forward and build that into the plan of how to be able to participate fully and for them to be able to acquire some, benefits from economic benefits that would come from their territory eventually. And so we're looking forward to the talk of it. And certainly if there's, monies available to be able to invest in some of these activities, and certainly that's what we're going to be taking a look at. We have a series of meetings with our own leadership in the days and weeks, months to come about all of this, and to see how we can participate and see what we need to do to mitigate any plans as well, to ensure that there's still protection of lands, and the animals, because there's still lots of animals up here, and the birds and the fish and clean drinking water that we need to have access to. So despite, the excitement that may come from some people saying, oh, there's a lot of critical minerals, let's go get them. But there's still caution that has to be played out as we go about doing something like that.
I love your area of this province, Lawrence, and I hope to get up there soon and see all of you. Thank you very much for making the time for the show this morning.
Thank you, Mike. We have about 297 trillion mosquitoes up here for you. So
okay, we'll work on that before I come, okay? Thanks again, Lawrence. Thank you, Martina.
Thank you.
Bye-bye. Martina Palahimo and Lawrence Martin joining us. Martina is a postdoctoral research fellow in environmental and urban change at York University. Lawrence, the director of lands and resources at the Mushkegowuk Council, based out of Timmins, as he mentioned, truly is an area of this province that I absolutely adore and would love to get back up that way sometime soon. But to the matter at hand, I couldn't help but see the parallels, and I'm sure you did as well, between Ontario's Bill 5 to unleash the economy, create these special economic zones where critics have argued the rules around planning simply don't apply, and the federal Bill C5, which met with opposition primarily from those concerned with Indigenous rights, the constitutionally enshrined necessity for meaningful consultation here. There's all kinds of talk about, blockades and what might happen if this meaningful consultation is not undertaken as we embark on this rather ambitious agenda set forward by Prime Minister Mark Carney. Now, he made it clear on Friday that there will be meaningful consultation and it will happen over the summer. But as Lawrence Martin points out, these things tend to take years, not just months, which is what we have of summer ahead. How do you feel about the ambitious nature of these plans federally? Are they too ambitious? Can we do enough meaningful consultation over the course of a summer to get these nation-building projects underway? Will we meaningfully consult with our Indigenous communities? Would love your thoughts on what lies before us federally here on the Mike Farwell Show. This is 570 News Radio and Rogers TV.
I think there needs to be more time and like what Lawrence was saying, like spent in community to be able to lead and center the rights of Indigenous people in these projects. So I think it's important to think about how we advance these across the country, but also taking the time to consult and make sure that this bill is done right.
That is Martina Palahimo, who's a PhD candidate at Queen's University in the Department of Geography and Planning. She joined us this morning along with Lawrence Martin, the Director of Lands and Resources at the Mushkegowuk Council. And we were talking about Bill C-5, which is the Liberal government's major projects legislation, which did pass in the House of Commons on Friday, as MPs wrapped up a brief but hectic spring sitting. It was about 4 weeks long. Prime Minister Carney had suggested that if they don't move this legislation through, they would consider extending beyond Friday and into this week and who knows how much longer in order to get this legislation moved along. But as I mentioned earlier, the Conservatives did support what Prime Minister Carney and the Liberals were putting forward. And now what this bill means is that once a project is deemed to be in our national interest, the legislation would allow the government to skirt certain laws, such as the Impact Assessment Act, in order to get construction underway. And as I said earlier, that is remarkably similar to what we heard about Bill 5 here in Ontario. So I don't know if Mark Carney and Doug Ford are the same person these days, or how we would possibly characterize that. But we have both of these leaders, the Premier of Ontario and our new Prime Minister here in Canada, talking similarly about skirting certain laws in order to get things done. And one of the big concerns in both cases was the impact on our environment and the impact on our Indigenous communities and whether or not meaningful consultation would be undertaken. Now, Prime Minister Carney, before that legislation passed on Friday, made it clear, it was late Thursday, I believe, he made his comments around the importance of Indigenous consultation, the fact that it absolutely would happen as enshrined in our Constitution. And it just leaves one to wonder, and we've talked about this quite a bit on the show, as ambitious as the agenda is, can we really get there? Can we get there provincially or federally, quite frankly? Have we spent too much time throwing up roadblocks to getting things done? We're talking about pipelines. We're talking about northern roads. We're talking about all manner of things that will have tremendous environmental impact and impact on the communities that we want to move these projects through. And I'm struggling to find the major infrastructure project that we've undertaken in the past couple of decades that hasn't really been bogged down. And I'm not saying the consultation and the work along the way is unnecessary, but there are so many layers to it. It makes it awfully difficult to get things done in this country sometimes. And I'm curious as to how Prime Minister Carney and this Liberal government will live up to this ambitious agenda. Step one was getting the bill passed on Friday. This is the Mike Farwell Show, 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. Would it be too much for me to just spend a moment again advocating for one level of local government? Do you think we could do that one of these days? One of these days, I would love for us to meaningfully engage in the conversation. I know that there are little political fiefdoms to be protected around the region, Everybody wants to maintain that share, but I think we have to look at what's best for us in the big picture here. And our two-tier municipal system, while it does work, I think it works in spite of it being two-tier, not because it is two-tier. We would be just fine. I hereby state again, 20 to 25 municipal councillors instead of 59. Instead of 59, and they can be full-time, okay? Instead of 59 part-time, 7 mayors, a regional chair, all the different departments within each municipality, enough. And here's another example of how the two levels are not necessarily on speaking terms. I don't know how we get ourselves into situations like this, but Kings Road, that starts at New Dundee and Kitchener and runs through into North Dumfries Township, is being closed down by the region for some road work to be done. At the same time, on the other end, so like I said, starts at New Dundee, Kings Road, and then takes you down into near the Roseville area in North Dumfries. And there you've got the Roseville Bridge, which remains under construction. So what you have essentially done is seal off any businesses, people along Kings Road entirely, because on one end, the Roseville Bridge is still under construction. On the other end, you can't gain access because the work's being done. You're completely shut off. And now you're going to be rerouting all of this heavy machinery and farm traffic onto roads that do not usually see that traffic or are equipped to carry that traffic. Why can't you reopen the bridge before you close the road? And of course, you've got the mayor of one of the municipalities, in this case, Sue Foxton in North Dumfries, advocating for this at the lower tier municipal government. But the upper tier, the region, no, we're going to close down this road before this bridge work is completed. And we're essentially shutting off not only the businesses and the people, but a key road for farm machinery equipment to be moved in our community. Left hand, meet right, and please talk to one another. This is the Mike Farwell Show, 570 News Radio.
This is where today's topics turn into today's talking points. It's local and it's Democratic radio at its finest. This is the Mike Farwell Show on 570 News Radio.
What is before us today is a thoughtful staff report that's well-researched with a trusted and reliable partner in ArtsBuild Ontario who has a proven model in the community. And that's what we should be asking ourselves if we want to defer. Otherwise, in my mind, we should be reconsidering that decision from February. And it's also particularly frustrating in my mind to have significant community support come out here and speak to why this project is so important and then say, yeah, thanks, come back next week.
The Mike Farwell Show continues
on 570 News Radio.
That is Ward 2 councillor in the city of Waterloo, Royce Bodley, at last week's Waterloo Council meeting, where an issue was discussed that I thought was going to be a slam dunk. The St. Columba Church at Lincoln and Mayfield in Waterloo, as you know, and you heard Royce allude to it in that clip, back in February, city of Waterloo decided to purchase the church as it was being decommissioned as a church, and then eventually housing will be built there. In the meantime, back in February, the report said this could be used for creative space as an arts hub. And so you get to the meeting last week where I thought it would be a slam dunk to bring in this arts hub with the support of ArtsBuild Ontario, and suddenly a little fly was thrown into the ointment, a little monkey in the wrench. And what I thought would be a slam dunk did not end up passing. It's been deferred until tonight. Councillor Bodley makes time for our show this morning. Morning, Royce.
Good morning, Mike. How are you today?
I'm all right, thanks. How are you?
Not too bad.
Good. So what happened last week?
Well, last week we had a councillor put forward a request to defer this decision to get a little bit more information on some sticking points for that particular councillor. And, so we voted last week to defer this. I was not in support of deferring it, obviously, as you heard in my clip there, but we've deferred it until today, and we will be discussing it again this evening.
Based on what I heard in the meeting last week, Royce, it sounds like the concerns were primarily financial in nature, which just makes me wonder to something that you alluded to again from that clip we just heard, that this probably should have been dealt with several months ago when the first report came forward. But is this new information that's come to light, or how did we get stuck here?
In my mind, this is not new information. Council has, all councils across the province, across the country have funding pressures, of course. This is why we have been collectively advocating for a change in the municipal funding framework with our partners at the province and at the federal government. We're dealing with all sorts of things: inflationary crisis, affordability crisis, tariff impacts. We have a climate crisis. We're dealing with an infrastructure deficit. So there are always significant pressures from a financial perspective on councils. And yet we are asked to commit to all sorts of different priorities across our cities. And in this case, we committed to this priority to find more space for the arts community. In terms of funding sources, however, nothing has changed in that regard. We've got staff coming to us and sharing with us a proposal for a 3-year lease that is fully covered by the funding sources that were approved unanimously back in February.
Why is the creation of this arts hub important to you as a councillor in Waterloo?
Well, I think the arts are important to council in general, not just me on council. We have been investing heavily in the arts community for quite some time. In fact, the partnership that we have with Arts Build Ontario at the Wing 404 space that we've created was a really great step for us. But we know from a 2023-2024 consultation that we've conducted with the arts community that space is one of the biggest concerns for the arts community. And in fact, that was borne out when the Wing 404 was activated as a space for artists. We had 71 applications and only space for 21 individuals. And so we know that there is latent demand out there for arts spaces across our community. And that was really the opportunity that was before us in February and continues to be before us this evening, is to assess what that latent demand is. And then in particular with the St. Columba space, to assess whether this particular location would be appropriate for maybe a long-term use if a future council were to look at this as part of, in conjunction with the affordable housing going forward. So in my mind, the opportunities that before us far outweigh the risks. This is going to equip a future council with the information that they need in order to make informed decisions around not only whether there is latent art space, which we know, but how much latent arts demand, there is, but whether or not this is an appropriate space. And it also helps us at the same time mitigate some of these current pressures, or plug holes, if you will, in terms of what we know is out there in the arts community.
You mentioned that affordable housing, Royce, and we know that when the city bought this land back in February, the plan longer term is to create housing here, this affordable housing that you mentioned. Is there any danger in signing this 3-year lease for the art space and then not getting the housing built fast enough?
In my mind, no. In my mind, typically it takes some period of time for us to activate sort of a land sale, which is ultimately what we would end up needing to do. We would need to put out a request for expression of interest on the site. The site is currently zoned for low density, or it has an official plan designation for low density residential. So that could be up to sort of 4-story stacked townhomes. It's possible that future council might consider doing something more than that, and that would necessitate an official plan amendment if, for example, we wanted to look at 6-story buildings on the site, just as an example. So I think it would be appropriate, and I think we have directed staff to sort of go down the pathway here of what the affordable housing is going to look like there. What are some of the priorities that council is going to have for when we ultimately sell this site and when we ultimately build affordable housing on it? Is it going to include a community art space? Is it going to be within the current official plan framework? Or are we going to consider permitting slightly higher density? So there's a lot of questions still that are out there that need to be answered and will be answered in due time. And that's frankly why back in February, council unanimously decided, let's go down that path, but let's find a quality interim use for this 3-year period, and that's where we settled on this art space concept.
I'm sure tonight's meeting will be well attended again by those with a vested interest in what happens on this property. Royce, any inkling on your end after the deferral last week as to where things stand as you head into the meeting tonight? Do you think this Arts Hub can be successfully approved?
Well, I hope so. I think there's going to be, as you say, sort of a good debate and discussion about what's out there and what the funding sources are and what has changed since February from a funding perspective, because I think that's sort of the sticking points at this point in time. To me, nothing has changed, and I look forward to that conversation. And from my mind, I think that the unanimously approved decision back in February still stands, and the justification for why we did that is still there. But I also respect the fact that it is okay for councils to have dissension, and it is okay for councils to reconsider and thoughtfully think out and discuss various decisions that we've made. And so I look forward to the discussion tonight. But no, I have not lost hope that we are going to be able to move forward with this. I think it's a quality project. It's has a stable funding source for how we're going to move forward with it. The full costs are completely known. And this is something that was community-led and community-driven and is really important not only to the community but to the arts community as well, too. And so I hope council considers that as part of our discussion tonight. But as I say, I really look forward to getting the perspectives of my council colleagues this evening as well.
I look forward to that discussion tonight also. Royce, thanks for making time this morning. I appreciate it.
Not a problem. Thanks, Mike. You have a great day.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Royce Bodley is the Ward 2 councillor in Waterloo. I will confess, it's not often I get surprised at council meetings these days. I thought it was a slam dunk last week. I thought it was just, we're just going to put the rubber stamp on this thing because it just made sense. I mean, you're not going to build housing on the land tomorrow. You've got this opportunity. And I acknowledge my bias here. I am a huge supporter of and proponent of our arts community. I think they improve a community's well-being in ways we don't even realize. I truly believe that. So making use of this space in a functional way with a little arts hub before you get around to the building of this affordable housing, it just seemed like a slam dunk to me. Turns out it wasn't. And so the discussion will begin anew tonight at Waterloo Council. This is the Mike Farwell Show. Oh, speaking of getting surprised, I'm not surprised by this one that happened in Kitchener. I'll share that with you coming up. I think you'll get a kick out of it because, sometimes when you make the vote. And anyway, you knew. I'll tell you what we knew coming up on the Mike Farwell Show. 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. Municipal councils are really interesting places. So Waterloo tonight will discuss for the second consecutive week something I thought would be a slam dunk, and that is the creation of this arts hub inside the building that was the St. Columba Church at Lincoln and Mayfield. The city of Waterloo is going to buy that property, has agreed to purchase that property. Eventually it will be turned into housing. In the meantime, this arts hub seemed to make sense. That's within a council and very much within its purview. What gets more difficult, and I always feel for municipal councillors in this regard, is when we're talking about development. And of course, your municipal council is closest to the community where that development is happening. But if things don't go the way that the developer would like for their proposed project, they can take it to the Ontario Land Tribunal, the OLT, which almost always rules in favor of the developer. And then all the work that the municipal councillors do can go right out the window because the developer then gets from the provincial tribunal whatever it wants. I want to take you to two places. First, I want to take you to the physical location of this proposed development, which is at 4611 King Street East in Kitchener. I know, where's that? Picture that you're driving out past Sports World, past the old movie theater out there, towards Chantel. Okay, so you're on King Street East, and you're coming up on the on-ramp to the 401 West to take you out towards Homer Watson and go towards London, North Dumfries, all that stuff. So you're on King Street East, right? And on your right, you're just coming past that little strip plaza that has Goldman's Appliances in it. So right beside that strip plaza, and before you get to the on-ramp to the 401 West, there's an empty parcel of land. That's where a two-tower development is proposed. So now I've got the where. Let me take you back to the when, which was early March when Kitchener Council considered this. And Councillor Paul Singh was quick to point out the dangers of council going against a staff report that says this development should be approved.
It would likely get defeated at the ULT. One, the ratios of applications that are in favor of the developer are 97 or 96 to 4%, let alone on top of it something that's supported by our staff.
Supported by staff. And when you go to the Ontario Land Tribunal, almost always, 97% of the time, the Land Tribunal, the provincial tribunal, votes in favor of the developer. But Councillor Jason Deneau, in whose ward this development is proposed, just couldn't find a way to get behind it.
If I were to support this, I believe I'd be doing a disservice to our community, to my ward, but also to the city. I believe the community knows there is a risk that if this goes to OLT, if it is denied, that it's going to be a much worse outcome. I don't want to speak for all the residents on Limerick, but from all indications, they're willing to take that risk. Not every piece of land that we have available in the community, in the city, is right for development. It's really not. We have to be sensible, and we have to be, it's gotta fit in. And this is not about NIMBYism whatsoever. It's just making sure we're doing what's right. And this is not a good development.
Not a good development, says the councillor for the ward. He references residents in the Limerick Drive area because, as you can imagine, when you're in a residential neighborhood and you have tall towers going up nearby, there are concerns raised. Even Councillor Deneau pointed to the other side of King Street. So remember, we're on the side where you're merging onto the 401 West ramp. You're just past Goldman's Appliances there. Vacant land. Imagine a couple of towers springing up there. What about the other side of the street? There's no residential development over there. In 10 to 15 years, we'll be ready to develop that, said Councillor Deneau. But even in his comments, he acknowledged that there is a risk that we reject this at council. The developer could take it to the Ontario Land Tribunal. Council rejected the development proposal by a count of 8-3. The only people voting in favor, Councillor Singh, Councillor Stephanie Stretch, and Mayor Verbanovic. The other 8 against the development proposal. And what has now happened? Exactly as predicted. The developer is taking this to the Ontario Land Tribunal where, and we'll follow it for you, but this is just another reminder of how difficult it is sometimes for our municipal councils, right? They want to do what's best for the people in their neighborhood that they represent. The people in this neighborhood said this isn't going to work. They've got myriad reasons why they don't think it'll work. Council rejects it. Developer takes it to the OLT. And that's where they almost always win. Municipal councils, in some instances, just like this, are almost powerless. They did what they could, but now the developer is taking it to the OLT, and it can put forward whatever version of the project it wants and see if the Ontario Land Tribunal from the provincial level will approve it, despite what Kitchener Council wanted back in March. Such is life as a municipal councillor today. This is the Mike Farwell Show, 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. I talked to a young fellow at the Walk to End ALS yesterday who is just finishing up grade 8, headed to KCI next year for grade 9. And it just made me think back on the milestone that it is to finish elementary school and move on to high school. Of course, beyond that, some of us end up at a post-secondary school, and depending on the course you're taking or the degree you'd like to obtain, it can take anywhere from 3 to 7, 8, even more years. But how about almost 50 years from the time you started until the time you got your degree. That's how long it took a quote-unquote farm boy from Guelph to get his degree from the University of Guelph. But I think you'll enjoy the story that tells you the reasons it took that long for our next guest. Plus, before 11 o'clock, I don't know how big a raise you got last year, but I'm guessing it wasn't quite as high as the raise of these people. I know you people, but these people got a really big raise. And tell me again, how many passwords were possibly stolen through an internet leak? All of that coming up before 11 here on the Mike Farwell Show, 570 News Radio. Well, I mentioned before that update with Devin that I ran into a young fellow yesterday at the Walk to End ALS who's about to graduate elementary school, moving on from Margaret Ave to KCI. That's a big moment. That's the time of year for graduations. And in Guelph, at the University of Guelph, one of the fellows who walked across the stage was 68 years young. And he got his degree 49 years after beginning his studies. That graduate is none other than Dave Burnett, who joins the show this morning. Dave, good morning.
Good morning, sir.
What the heck took you so long?
Well, when I first started, I really didn't want to go to university. It seemed to be a good decision by the school and by my parents because my grades were out of high school were exceptional. But I didn't want to be there. So it was the 70s. It was the generation of rebellion. And so, but after a year and a little bit, I dropped out. Was to spend the next 20 years of my life going down what I call the rabbit hole of addiction. And about 30 years ago, an old family friend showed up to see me one day. I didn't know what day of the week it was, really didn't care. And the next thing I know, they've got me tucked into rehab. And that was the beginning of sort of getting back to school and starting things.
Incredible. What was it that inspired you to go back to the University of Guelph and sort of pick up where you left off all those years ago?
There were things that I wanted to do. If we get past the rebellious stage, there were things I wanted to do that I figured I needed to have a university degree. I needed to have those letters after my name, doors that would be open. And I started back, got about a year, I think it was past my second year. And in one summer, instead of a summer job, the company I was working for offered me a full-time permanent job instead of going back to school, with the assurance that, yes, we will give you time to go to school, et cetera, et cetera. That never sort of happened, but I've got a choice between student loans and a full-time paycheck. It's not a real hard decision.
I guess it wouldn't be. How much... what was it like, Dave? How much different was it going back all those years later?
It's changed a lot. And probably the greatest change is if I compare it to what the university is like in the last couple of years versus, 40 or 50 years ago. I joke that I started with blackboards and chalk and ended where everything is online. So the technology was nothing short of amazing. The other thing I've noticed in the university, 50 years ago, it was about remembering and regurgitating facts. Now it's about why. The last three courses I took, there were no right answers. You had to take a position, and then the marks and the grades were, how did you think? Why are you thinking that way? Which was sort of literally unheard of 50 years ago.
Now that you have obtained this degree at the perfect age of 68, what do you intend to do with it?
Well, it was a bucket list thing for me. It became, sort of a challenge and, one of those sort of loose ends in life that, wanted to round off. what am I going to do with it? If you talk to my wife, she will tell you nothing. If you talk to my baby sister, she said, I'll talk to you at the end of August and see how many courses you've taken. I really don't know where it's going to go. I had to do a research project in the final course that I took, and it's opened some doors to more research. It's opened my mind to. I really enjoyed the course. Pain in the butt, but so I don't know. I think this summer is the first summer in lots of years where I haven't had school sort of hanging in the background. So probably going to not do much of anything for the next 6 or 7 weeks. And I think the plan is now to go back up. I've got some professors I want to say thank you to, and I'm going to sort of test the waters in about 6 weeks as to whether I go further. The other thing that we've got to find out, as a senior citizen, when I went back, when I turned 65, the university waived my tuition, which always was a problem, getting stuff done. The tuition per course now is about what I paid for my whole semester 50 years ago. So money is an issue. If the university is going to underwrite my master's degree, I'm certainly receptive to that. I'll worry about the domestic front. I think my wife's final comment was, "You'll do what you're going to do anyway." So we'll see.
How does it feel, Dave, to have checked that off the bucket list?
Well, it's taken me a while to get my head around that I'm finally done, because you take so many courses and so many assignments, so many projects, you look at the grade report and you move on. It really didn't hit me until the convocation ceremony when the pipe band started to play in. And I began to realize, oh my gosh, I've accomplished something fairly significant here. And then when I got a standing ovation when I came across the stage to get my diploma. It's still sort of registering as to the fact that I'm done. After all these years, I'm done. So it feels good to have it off the bucket list. Several years ago, I had a mentor helping me get my life back in order. And I said something about going back to school, and he said, think of what it will do for your self-confidence. And I didn't understand then what he was saying, but I understand now. And the final thing with having it done now, I say adult learning and continuous learning is more fun for me than Sudoku. To keep your mind aware. And so I'm still sort of getting used to the idea it's over. This weekend, I'm going to a graduation party for my granddaughter. She's graduated out of Queens. So the family joke is I got out of Guelph before she got out of Queens. And a little bit of a family disappointment. We have 2 daughters who are graduates of Guelph years ago. In the next generation, we have no Guelph grads yet. There are still 3 hopefuls that will follow Grandpa's footsteps, but I don't know. They'll do what they're going to do.
It's a great story, Dave. Congratulations. It's great to have a Bachelor of Science graduate on the show with us this morning. I hope that lands well with you.
Yes, it's very well, and thank you for all the media. And I wasn't anticipating any of that. That wasn't sort of why any of this happened. It wasn't until I applied for graduation and I got a call from the university that said, do you realize it's been 49 years? Can we do an article about you? So, yeah. it feels great today. Now the reality is sunk in. I still got to pay bills. I have my own business, so I've still got to pay bills today. And clients that would like my undivided attention for a little bit.
Well, go get back to those clients. But seriously, thank you for sharing the story. It's a great one, Dave.
Thank you for your time.
Enjoy your day. Bye now.
I will, yes.
Dave Burnett, a 2025 graduate, Bachelor of Science from the University of Guelph, a mere 49 years after he first started the program back in the 70s. We'll take a break. When we come back, your pay rose how much last year? I'll bet you not as much as the pay of these people rose. And you say again the number of passwords that may have been stolen in an internet leak. I'll tell you those stories coming up on the Mike Farwell Show. This is 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. We are about a couple hours in with a couple hours to go. In other words, about halfway through the show. I like to find some headlines to share with you at the halfway point. And one that stood out to me this morning was by how much the pay of your average Canadian CEO rose last year. How much did you get by way of a raise? Was it 20%? Because that's how much more CEOs made on average last year. Compensation reaching more than $10.3 million in 2024, which is up 19.6% since 2023. This marks the first time a typical Canadian CEO of a large company earned more than $10 million in 1 year. You know what they say, right? Don't hate the game. Or don't hate the player, hate the game. Something like that. Anyway, I know I didn't get no 20% last year. This one struck me as well because a leak of passwords, according to some cybersecurity experts, suggests that, are you ready for this? Like, if I were to just ask you, how many passwords do you think could possibly be exposed in a given leak? How about 16 billion, yes, billion with a B, passwords that may have been stolen? And now, according to the cybersecurity experts, if hackers manage to get their hands on your password for Google, Apple, Facebook, stealing your money and your identity may be easier than taking candy from a 3-year-old, says the story. Of course, there are things that we can do to protect ourselves, which include varying your passwords and avoid reusing them. Multi-factor authentication can also offer an added layer of security. I confess, I know, look, I'm not the password 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 guy or password being password guy, but there are so many ding-dang places that you need a new ding-dang password that I reuse. I grew up in Waterloo region. Reduce, reuse, recycle. I reuse passwords. Don't tell anybody, okay? Please, just let's keep it between you and me. And finally, one more. If you missed the story of the stolen chair from the Gaslight District in Cambridge, this one really got me because it's not just your standard chair on 4 legs. It's actually in the shape of a top, you know, the kind of the top that you spin. It's a funky chair, to say the least. And so it's not that easy to just pick up and move to some other place. In fact, these are outdoor chairs. They're pretty ding-dang heavy. And wouldn't you know, surveillance cameras at the Gaslight District in Cambridge caught the thieves carrying the chair away from the outdoor patio area. And so the Gaslight District posts a cheeky poster online asking for the clues to return the chair. Those clues that would lead to the return of the chair would get you a $100 restaurant gift card. And wouldn't you know, they found it on Facebook Marketplace, by the way. And I guess the internet played Good Samaritan here and convinced the seller that they really ought not try to sell this rather unique chair. They should just return it. And so they did. Surveillance footage from the Gaslight District saw the same people who had carried it out days earlier carrying it back in to return it to its rightful spot at the Gaslight District. And no, they did not get the $100 gift card, restaurant gift card as a reward because, you know, you don't get a reward for putting back what you shouldn't have taken in the first place. And I know the story of the stolen chair was one that just kept you on the edge of your seat this morning. This is the Mike Farwell Show, 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. I know that you have heard of Oktoberfest. Of course you have. But are you ready for some Bass-toberfest? Paul Kreuzenbrunner is a member of KW Cambridge Bassmasters. And Paul, why don't we start there? Who are the Bassmasters?
We're a local fishing organization. We do pike tournaments in the spring and bass tournaments throughout the summer and fall. So we are a local bass fishing club. We do conservation work. We do cleanups around rivers and shorelines, especially at boat ramps. This year, we're really targeting all the boat ramps we go to do a cleanup to make sure that we conserve our waters.
Speaking of the fall and a bass tournament, then, we're here today to talk about Bass-toberfest. Tell us more about it.
Well, I'm also a member of the Alpine Club, have been since I was a kid. My grandfather was one of the founding members of the Alpine Club. And so I went to an Oktoberfest meeting about a year and a half ago, and they were talking about all these other events that they're doing, and I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, you know, I'm a bass fisherman and I'm in Oktoberfest. I was in the Alpine Dancers for many years. Why don't we mix the two and go put bass fishing and Oktoberfest together and call it Bass-toberfest? So that's what we're doing. We're doing an event called Bass-toberfest. It will take place this year on September the 13th, 2025. It's a bass tournament that we'll be hosting at Wildwood Lake out by St. Mary's. It's only going to be 40 boats maximum. The tournament will run from 9 a.m. until 2 p.m., and after that, everyone is invited back to the Alpine Club for an Oktoberfest-style dinner, awards. We'll have a prize table. We've got sponsors lined up already. We're still looking for more. We have a live band and a catered Oktoberfest dinner. It's going to be a fantastic day.
That dinner and fellowship at the Alpine Club would be worth it all on its own, but we know that people will be interested in this. And even though it's not happening till September, registrations are now open, Paul. How can people get involved?
They can go to the Alpine Club website, alpineclub.ca, go to upcoming events, and there's a link there for Bass-toberfest. Scroll down, the information is there. There's a button you press to fill out your entry form. You and a boater and a non-boater, so people with boats, must have a live well because this is a live release tournament. Fill out the form, email it to our email address, which is really simple, basstoberfest@gmail.com. We're also on Facebook, KW Bass-toberfest. People can look us up there. And once I get the entry forms and payment, you're on the list and you'll be partaking in a fantastic one-day event.
Remind us that website one more time where we can go to register.
alpineclub.ca, upcoming events, and click on the button to fill out an entry form.
Paul Kreuzenbrunner joining the show, a member of the KW Cambridge Bassmasters, getting ready for Bass-toberfest in the fall. What a perfect idea to complement Oktoberfest. They seem to fit hand in hand, don't they? We're fast approaching 11 a.m. Your update in the 570 News Center. Every Monday, the next hour, I think you're accustomed to. This Week in Music History is coming up, and 30 minutes from now, David Drewe will be here with Drewe's Views, and David says he's quite upset with me, and I'm going to get me a tongue lashing this morning at 11:30. Can't wait. Looking real forward to that. This is the Mike Farwell Show, 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. You almost work up a sweat just listening to Olivia Newton-John, but is that the sexiest song of all time? We'll find out as we welcome our good friend and musicologist, Brian Allison, to the program for This Week in Music History. Good morning, Brian.
Hi, Mike.
Reminder, check out Brian's Facebook page of the same name, This Week in Music History, for even more than you can hear during this segment every Monday morning at 11. Before we get to sexy songs, Brian, let's start with some CanCon and Bryan Adams hitting the top of the charts this week in music history.
He did indeed, going back 40 years, Mike, 1985.
Wow.
When you and I were just high school lads. So Brian hit the top of the chart in the U.S. for the first time on June 22nd, 1985, with his ballad, Heaven. And it was also a number 35 hit in the UK. The song had been featured in the 1983 film A Night in Heaven, which I had to Wikipedia because I was not familiar with that film. But apparently it was a very low-budget film that didn't do so well at the box office, so I'm not surprised. But the single definitely put Brian on the map. He'd been around for a couple of years already, recorded a couple of albums, but Heaven definitely put him on the map, and that sort of drew his career to, new places where Bryan Adams would arguably be one of the largest solo artists within the next couple of years.
I remember the rock ballad well. The movie, I'm with you. I would have had to Google A Night in Heaven as a movie. But speaking of music and movie pairings, how about, arguably one of the biggest albums ever in Prince's Purple Rain?
Yeah, and a big film, too. And a bit of a surprise to most people. So June 25th, 1984, Purple Rain, the album, was released. And the album coincided with the release of the film, of course, of the same name, Prince and the Revolution. Oftentimes that gets forgotten, that it wasn't just a Prince album. It was Prince and the Revolution. And, it went on to have a huge, huge amount of success. 24 weeks in the top spot of the Billboard 200. And the singles, of course, were When Doves Cry, Let's Go Crazy, were both top 10 singles. I Would Die For You and the title track were also big songs. And the album went on to win 2 Grammy Awards and an Academy Award for Best Original Song Score. So pretty impressive for the Purple Guy. Again, and Prince was an artist who was up and coming. He had a couple of smaller hits. Little Red Corvette had been a year before, which was fairly popular, but this just put him into the stratosphere. He was right up there with Michael Jackson in terms of popularity by the time Purple Rain came out in 1984.
It's interesting that you note that the album, of course, was by Prince and the Revolution, the band, because there's a British band that I had never heard of, but if you list off the members of it for us, I think they'll sound familiar enough that we'll recognize the band that they ultimately became. But on This Week in 1970, Smile was formed.
Yeah, and people might not know the name Smile because the band eventually changed their name to something a little bit more recognizable. But they played their first concert on June 27th, 1970, featured a young singer named Freddie Balsara, who might sound vaguely familiar to people. And they played their first gig at Cornwall's Truro City Hall in England, and they would go on to change their name of their band. But first, the lead singer decided that Freddie Balsara wasn't the most rock and roll sounding name, so he changed his name to Freddie Mercury. The band went from Smile to a band name of Queen, and I think the rest is fair to say is history. Queen would go on to sell an astonishing 300 million albums worldwide, becoming one of the biggest artists of all time. And even today, after the untimely death of Freddie in 1991, they're consistently voted one of the best rock bands of all time. Freddie has been consistently voted one of, if not the greatest rock and roll vocalists of all time. So it started This Week in Music History 55 years ago in a little small club in England with a band called Smile.
It's so interesting to me. Because it's about the music, right? So Smile could have recorded it just as easily as Queen, because you're talking about the same group of guys here. And Freddie Balsara could be Freddie Balsara, not Freddie Mercury. It's just, I find it fascinating. Did the name change on both counts, the band and the lead singer, matter to their success ultimately?
I think talent is talent.
Right.
And if you're talented enough, it's going to come through. But there's also a marketing component, and especially during the 70s, bands coming out of the UK, you needed to have a catchy name, and you needed to have a lead singer who, was, out there and very presentable to the public. And I guess they just thought, well, Freddie Balsera doesn't sound rock and roll enough, and Smile doesn't sound, rock and roll enough either. So let's make a couple of changes. And I don't know if that led to the band's success directly, but I mean, they're Queen. They'll always be Queen.
Brian Allison is a good friend of the program and our resident musicologist. He joins us every Monday morning at 11 for This Week in Music History. Please don't forget to follow the Facebook page of the same name, This Week in Music History. And as we continue our conversation this morning, a couple of artists who left us too soon. Well, you might argue that Prince did as well. And what is the sexiest song of all time? That's still to come on This Week in Music History, part of the Mike Farwell Show every Monday morning at 11 on 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. Every Monday morning at 11, Brian Allison, musicologist, joins us on the show for This Week in Music History. Don't forget, Brian has a Facebook page of the same name, This Week in Music History. Be sure to follow along there for more of what you get right here. And a couple of artists, Brian, who inarguably left us too soon factor into This Week in Music History, beginning back in 1960 with Eddie Cochran.
What a sad death, 1960. So June 23rd, Eddie Cochran hit number one in the UK charts with the aptly titled 3 Steps to Heaven. And it was so aptly titled because Eddie had passed away just 8 weeks prior in a car crash while touring in the UK. Sad, sad story. Eddie Cochran was one of the founding artists of rock and roll, was really one of the first guitar heroes. He was one of the first guys besides Chuck Berry that put the guitar front and center, and he influenced a lot of kids to pick up that instrument and start their own rock and roll band, including the Beatles. Eddie Cochran had a huge impact on the Beatles, and he was just 21 years old when he was tragically killed, just starting his career, barely getting off the ground, but he had charted hits like Summertime Blues and 20 Flight Rock, and it was just a sad day when we lost Eddie Cochran, but bittersweet to see 3 Steps to Heaven go to number one in the UK posthumously for Eddie.
I think the day would have been even sadder on This Week in 1977 if we had known it was going to be the last concert performed by the king of rock and roll.
The king, yeah, absolutely. So June 26, 77, Elvis at 42 years old played his last concert in Indianapolis Market Square Arena. This was just 2 weeks before his death, of course, in July. And it was very sad. He was wearing his white and gold suit, and he performed classics, Can't Help Falling in Love, Jailhouse Rock, Don't Be Cruel, Unchained Melody. I believe the last song that he performed on stage was Bridge Over Troubled Water by Simon and Garfunkel. Although don't quote me on that. I was trying to find an actual set list from that show, and I wasn't able to find one. But I believe that was the last song he played. So it was very sad to see Elvis at 42 years old play his very last concert ever. When you think of, again, what might have been, what would Elvis have done with his career, later in his 40s and into his 50s? Could he have still been making great rock and roll music up to that point?
Absolutely. 42 for a talent like his, absolutely far too young. Okay, we started our segment today, Brian, with a little bit of Olivia Newton-John's song Physical, which was a hit in 1982. But the sexiest song of all time?
Well, that's what Billboard magazine said. In 2012, they voted Olivia Newton-John's Physical as the quote-unquote sexiest song of all time. So you can talk amongst yourselves if that is the sexiest song of all time. Other rock songs that made the top 10, Rod Stewart's Tonight the Night, definitely up there. Marvin Gaye's Let's Get It On, Donna Summer, Hot Stuff, and another Rod Stewart selection, Do You Think I'm Sexy? Other notable entries included Donna Summer's Love to Love You Baby, George Michael's I Want Your Sex, and Tone Loc's Wild Thing. I don't know. What do you think? Is Physical by Olivia Newton-John the sexiest song ever written, Mike?
It's the most tiring, yes. I just, for whatever reason, I just always thought of it as like the workout video stuff, to be honest with you. For me, it would always be Let's Get It On with Marvin Gaye, for sure.
I tend to agree with you. I would maybe even co-headline that with Donna Summer's Love to Love You Baby, simply because the original version of Love to Love You Baby, the extended disco version, has a 6-minute section in the middle, which is basically the sound of Donna Summer having an orgasm, moaning, groaning. It's when you hear the extended version of that song, it's like, wow, that's pretty hot.
6 minutes, eh?
6 minutes.
Okay, that's going to put a lot of people to shame on that one, Brian. But I'll leave that there. I'll leave that there. And Tone Loc, I would be too busy laughing to engage in any. I just never. That song to me was just campy, personally.
I tend to agree with you. That one was a little bit lower on the list, but I think, given the content of the song, they wanted to include it as a quote unquote sexy song.
Fair enough. Okay, one more before I let you go, because anybody who is remotely into rock, indie rock, however you want to describe Radiohead, one of the best albums released on This Week in 1997.
Yep, 1997, Radiohead went to number 1 in the UK with their third album, OK Computer, and that featured the songs Paranoid Android, Karma Police, and Lucky, all charted. They did fairly well in North America too. It was the album that probably planted Radiohead firmly into the consciousness of the public. Went on to sell around 8 million copies, and it went on to also get a Grammy for Best Alternative Music Performance. Many music fans will say that every decade has a preemptive album, an album that defined that generation. For the 60s, most people will say Sgt. Pepper by the Beatles. For the 70s, most people will say Dark Side of the Moon by Pink Floyd. The 80s one has kind of yet to be defined. There are so many variations of the 80s that nobody has put it out there, although most people will say Thriller, just because of how big it was. But music critics agree that Radiohead's OK Computer is sort of the Sgt. Pepper of the 90s. It's the album that best described the 1990s music at that point. So that's certainly something. And of course, Radiohead has gone on to have a pretty big career and are still recording to this day.
It was a great album. Man, we're going to have just that conversation for fun one day. Best albums of decades, because where does Nevermind fit into that conversation then?
Exactly. I think where the critics come from is more of something that was so creative and so different and conceptual. Like when you think about Sgt. Pepper, there was music like Sgt. Pepper, but it wasn't all one album. The Beatles kind of put everything, all their eggs into one basket and made this incredibly creative statement. So I think that's where they're looking at as, album of the decade. Nevermind absolutely was a huge, huge record, but creatively there wasn't a lot of difference between the songs on the album, whereas Radiohead had a broader breadth of different kinds of music in one record.
It's an excellent point. This is why you're the musicologist, and I'm just here trying to, create talking points. Brian, great stuff as always.
Always good to talk to you, Mike. Look forward to next Monday.
Me as well, my friend. Bye-bye.
See you soon.
Brian Allison joins us every Monday morning at 11 with This Week in Music History. Don't forget to check out the Facebook page of the same name, This Week in Music History, and get all that we talk about and more. He does make a great point around why Radiohead might have, with OK Computer, been given the badge of best album of the 90s. Grunge, Nirvana, I would argue, started the movement, but it wasn't as conceptual and maybe as adventurous as OK Computer was by Radiohead. Anyway, always enjoy our chats with Brian. I hope you do as well. Quick break coming up. When we come back, I want to bring something new to our show. I think you'll like this because we've talked a lot over the years on the show, and I get the sense, I feel pretty strongly that you're a law and order person, and I think we always talk about accountability on this show, so we will get our own opportunity, and I extend it to you as well, to at any point you see fit, you can send somebody to this particular prison, and they will not be allowed bail. There will be no early release. You throw the book at them and you put them there and they stay there because you decided in your law and order ways. I'll introduce this particular prison to you next on the Mike Farwell Show. This is 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. Something new I've been wanting to bring to the show for a little bit. And today is the day I bring it to the show, thanks to the 25-year-old guy who has been charged after being clocked at 193 kilometers per hour on the 401 through Cambridge. 193. I know that you know the speed limit on the 401 is 100. I know we all do 120 and whatever. 193. There is precisely zero excuse for driving that speed anywhere other than on a racetrack. And so I introduced to you the not too long awaited feature on this show of Jackwagon Jail. If you do something so colossally stupid or annoying, you, as one of the 44 listeners to this program, have the opportunity to throw somebody in Jackwagon Jail. We will not give bail. There is no early release. We will lock up and throw away the key for the individual that we place into Jackwagon Jail. And the first entry into our brand new Farwell Show Jackwagon Jail is the Jackwagon who drove 193 kilometers per hour on the 401 through Cambridge. You, sir, a 25-year-old man from London, are in Jackwagon Jail. We've got an update on the way from the 570 News Center. And then Monday mornings, 11:30, David Drewe is here with Drewe's Views. And apparently he's some kind of mad with me today. We'll find out why. Coming up on the Mike Farwell Show. 570 News Radio.
Has anybody heard from Crazy Dave? Has anybody heard from Crazy Dave? Has anybody heard from Crazy Dave? Now that cat couldn't spell to win a bet, but he carried this battered notebook full of his poetry. More soul per square word than the Lord's Prayer. He was the kind of guy that called a spade a shovel, and a violin a fiddle, and a lady ma'am. And I don't even know why I think of him now. Maybe because he never told me a lie he'd have to apologize for later. Because he'd speak to a guy straight, eyeball to bloodshot eyeball, like he'd never even had a secret.
That is our friend David Drewe, who joins us every Monday morning, 11:30, for Drewe's Views. David is a former Conservative Party staffer and now operates Negotiating Change, Government Relations, Stakeholder Engagement Strategies. Good Monday morning, sir.
Good morning to you.
Are you saying that there is not really a feud, an interprovincial feud between Premier Daniel Smith in Alberta and Premier David Eby in British Columbia? Only the media is pretending there's one?
Well, on the pipelines issue specifically, the stuff that's been coming up since Mark Carney was elected, yeah, it's largely media manufactured. David Eby's saying, it doesn't really make sense to me and there's no proponent out there. And Daniel Smith saying, well, we're going to get the proponents. And there's nothing David Eby has said that precludes him having room for a project like that Northwest Pipeline if a proponent comes forward. He hasn't backed himself into a corner in any way. He's just sort of been putting the reasonable, I think the best way to characterize how he's looking at it is, I'll talk about it when it happens. He's not going to approve something hypothetical. He's not going to speak out in favor of something that is against his base. But if the case comes forward, he's open to it. And all this talk about they don't have this fight, they disagree on this, they disagree on this, both Smith and Eby are very clear. It's all hypothetical. We're talking about getting the ground together, and we are united on X, Y, or Z. Dave Eby's like, there's I forget what the capacity is, 200,000 barrels a day that could still be going through Keystone. Now, that would be going to the same darn port. It's not exactly diversification. But when you look at how much Keystone XL is adding to our GDP, it's adding, I think it's 0.4% annually to our GDP, which is a huge number. The fact that it's not at quite full capacity makes you think, well, we don't need the next pipeline to be at full capacity either to make a huge difference to our prosperity. So I see these two saying, Danielle Smith's doing everything she can to get pre-approval, so to speak, and social license out of David Eby, and he's just not willing to commit to anything in advance. That's all it is.
All right. Let's move on to Bill C-5, which made it through Parliament on Friday before this summer recess.
The House of Commons.
House of Commons.
Parliament technically is both the Senate and the House.
Thank you. So it did go through the House of Commons with support of the Conservatives. We got a chance to talk about it earlier today with a member of the Indigenous community in Timmins, Mushkagooak, and they are anticipating some meaningful consultation, but don't really fully grasp what that will look like in the matter of months over the summer.
Yeah, like I said, I am really glad it passed quickly, but I'm expecting myself to regret it. And it's just, at some point, you have to invest time. And this is something where we've talked about Mark Carney before with the decision to invite Modi that caught some of members of his caucus off guard. It wasn't unreasonable for the chief executive officer to make a decision like that, but he's not. He's the prime minister who has to maintain all of these constituencies. And I think what we saw last week is Mark Carney getting hoisted by good intentions. I believe his heart when he says, no, but the real consultations come when we have projects to talk about. But just the fact that this was not crystal clear in the legislation and these groups did not have an opportunity to speak their minds to this legislation is starting him off in bad faith in a way that he did not intend in any way at all. So now we have this next stage, and he's going to be going out having a series of workshop meetings. First it's with the Assembly of First Nations, then it's with the Métis, then it's with the ITK and the territories. But he's now playing catch-up. And then we're going to have the rubber hitting the road of actual projects. And that's where we're really going to see what happens. Can he cut through all of this red tape and maintain the goodwill we need amongst our stakeholders? Because, right now he's riding high in the polls, but there hasn't been a sacrifice made yet. If he starts cheesing off First Nations, what's Nate Erskine-Smith going to say? His government won't fall apart because the Conservatives took it down, but it could fall apart because his speed does not match the need for government to move with a little. The ship of state, I keep saying, is not a speedboat. It does not turn on a dime. Mark Carney is not only trying to get the way the public service works to change, he's trying to get the entire way executive federalism works to change. And, I want to say good luck to him. But then there's the other part of me that's just like, but is it worth the risk of trying to go this fast, this quickly, if it's going to blow up in our face? And for every day we advance right now, it's 3 weeks we delay later.
Okay, I'll come back to that in a moment. But I get the sense from one of the notes you sent me, David, that you feel similarly to me in this regard. I've been joking for a couple of weeks now that Premier Ford and Mark Carney might be the same guys. Bill 5 provincially, unleashing the Ontario Economy Act, and this bill federally that we're just talking about having passed through the House of Commons on Friday, remarkably similar in nature.
C5, Bill 5.
There you go. No, that too.
No, but honestly, that's just it. I think a lot of us were just a little bit confused because these similarly numbered bills, similarly named bills, dealing with largely the same concerns, covering Ontario in both cases, going through their legislatures at the exact same time. I think it was very easy for Joe Person on the street to get confused about what was in Bill 5, what was in C5, and the concerns about each. But honestly, I think this is one of those cases where the average person on the street, it's okay. If you don't know the difference between Bill 5 and C5, chances are, if you don't like one of them, you're not going to like the other. And if you like one, chances are you're going to like the other. There's the exact same concerns with the two of them.
Okay. To that end, let me go back half a step, and I said I'd come back to this. The ship of state is not a speedboat. Well said. You referenced layers of red tape. Look, I recognize how cavalier this sounds, and I'm not trying to be dismissive of the necessary work that has to happen for things to get done in this country. But David, at some point, does this not have to change? If we are going to seriously be a serious country when it comes to major infrastructure projects, nation-building efforts, are we not going to have to figure out a way to do business differently?
Do you know how SpaceX got ahead of NASA?
I don't.
NASA is government. They are very, very risk averse. Can you imagine spending enough money for a shuttle to crash? Elon Musk just keeps throwing stuff into space until it doesn't crash. And he doesn't care how many shots it takes. Every failure is a learning experience. That's not allowed in any way at government. There's a real problem with wanting government to move quickly and at the same time having no tolerance for failure like the private sector. Innovation takes risk. Innovation can sometimes be messy. The transitions can be rough. And, the Phoenix payroll system is the perfect example of what can go wrong if you don't understand just how complex things are and the need to take it slowly and, measure 3 or 4 or 5 times and then cut once.
All right. One more thing before the break, and that is the characterization I have been hearing in the week or so since the G7 ended, and that is that Prime Minister Mark Carney, as opposed to going in, he may have gone in elbows up, but he came out elbows down.
Well, it's part of it. There is that big question about where is the Mark Carney of the campaign. And now apparently we may see all those things he talked about in 30 days' time. That's when we may, it's probably not 26 days now, 25. Anyway, that's when he will potentially respond to Donald Trump if we haven't had any movement yet. But I'm not even thinking necessarily about Mark Carney. I'm thinking about us. It really, when you are looking at the polls, it doesn't seem like Donald Trump is anywhere near the concern that he was. What happens to Bill 5 and C5? This what they call it, the King Henry VIII clause, where if I don't like that law, it just doesn't apply in this case. Are we going to be giving that license in the face of First Nations objections if we aren't viewing Donald Trump as the threat that he was anymore? All of these things that Mark Carney is talking about doing are things that I, as a conservative, small c, have been wanting for the longest time. I am so happy to see a government being supported in these efforts. I don't expect the whole conservative, liberal supermajority to last that long, but it would have been so crazy for the conservatives to vote against this when it would have been like, wait, are you forswearing your entire history? This is everything you've ever... No, this is the liberals. Let them change their minds, Let them oppose policies just because of who's proposing those policies. These are good ideas. Back them up. But I don't see how long that can last.
David Drewe joins us every Monday morning at 11:30 for Drew's Views. We'll take a break, and as we continue, no, it's not the beginning of World War III, despite what U.S. President Donald Trump did this weekend. And David sent me a note yesterday, said I deserve to be taken to the woodshed for the Talkback Hour that I hosted last week. We'll find out why he's so upset with me as we continue on Drew's Views here on the Mike Farwell Show, 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. We talked earlier this morning as we continue Drew's Views. David Drewe in studio with us, owner, negotiating change, government relations, stakeholder engagement strategies, and a former staffer within our conservative government here in this country. Going south of this country, though, to the United States, and we talked about it earlier today on the show. He said he was going to end the war between Russia and Ukraine and the war between Hamas and Israel almost immediately after entering office, and he would not engage in so-called forever wars, and then Donald Trump bombed Iran.
And I like how he called it total destruction, because there is just no way he could get huge in. He wanted to get, huge destruction, but that just wouldn't have worked. And, okay, I'm not saying this was a good idea, Mike. Generally, I'm against bombing nuclear-type facilities. Just, there's like, what's downstream? I don't know. No, like, just, you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
There's a whole lot of boxes I would like to know that were ticked before I go, yeah, good idea. But I am seeing so much overreaction to this about, this guy started World War III. It was bad faith to be talking about negotiations while planning this. What's Iran's reaction going to be? Every day, Israeli planes are flying over it, like basically without any opposition. They could, mine the Persian Gulf or, try to blockade the Strait of Hormuz, but they have spent so much time just trying to get back on basically decent relations with their neighbors and they can't do this without cheesing off those very same neighbors, that's not something they want to do because that's in their really long-term bad interests. So yeah, as much as Donald Trump is saying huge destruction, what you're hearing out of Iran is it was minimal. It wasn't that bad, actually. And I am just reading that as them saying, see, our retaliation doesn't have to be that bad because they do not want to escalate this. Apparently, they have like a couple days worth of missiles left in stock to use to keep salvoing Israel. So yeah, they have a whole pile more targets they could try to target now that the U.S. has entered. But if you can't get through Israel's dome, do you think you're going to get through a carrier bubble? I don't think so. There's just really who's going to step in on behalf of Iran? China? Russia? Are there going to be smaller regional players that are going to join in on behalf of Iran after Donald Trump has just used bunker busters? Last term that he was in, he used, what was that thing called? The mother of all bombs? It's not necessarily a bad thing just because the Orange Goblin did it. And just because it's his mouth explaining it and he's doing it in his carnival way, let's not get confused, it doesn't mean that it was a bad thing to take potential nuclear capability away from a terrorist state.
Okay, last week on this show, we talked about our legal system and our frustrations within it.
Okay,
and
I'm not angry with you.
But you did say...
I've got my finger waving now, though,
okay.
So maybe I am. But I'm more disappointed.
Okay.
You don't punish people for being sick. And the language you were using, especially when you were conflating the Udo Hahn supervised out-of-hospital stuff with was it biker gangs coming out on repeated bail and the Minnesota assassin, these are very, very different things. First of all, you were comparing the worst possible penalty in Minnesota to a outcome. It's not necessarily true that this guy will get the death penalty.
I don't
he
recall
could get
any
up to the death penalty.
Sure. All I was pointing out was that there's your limit in one instance, and in ours, we're like, okay, you killed your wife. Go ahead and speed date. There's a problem.
No,
there.
but see, that's just it. He was sentenced not to punishment, but to care.
And I want better care for him.
No, and I think we can go along with, I can agree with you on that. But when you were bringing up pure criminals and the failures of the criminal system and conflating that with failures of the medical system, that's where it gets very close to saying we should be punishing people for being sick. And that's the entire stigma you were walking into there. I agree with you. I am very confused about whether he was allowed to speed date or whether he just did. We don't know whether he would have had any problem being allowed to speed date if he hadn't gotten into trouble with the harassment thing. Not clear on that. But we also are saying we want to know what went wrong. And I'm sorry, we can't, because this is not a case of a prisoner release. This is a case of somebody's medical records. We got to kind of trust the system a little bit.
I don't. That's my point.
I don't. Honestly, I don't either. But the solution is not to say that because you were found not criminally responsible of a heinous crime, your life should be over just as if you were criminally responsible. Okay. Because there is a difference, and that's for the doctors.
All right. I'll leave your point there. We probably disagree a little bit on this, but that's okay. We can still be friends and have these weekly conversations. And before this one ends, tell me again what your doctor is prescribing.
No, this is up in Sudbury, my hometown.
Oh, yeah, your hometown. So not your doctor anymore, but could be.
But yeah, the doctors in town will give a patient who needs a little bit of exercise 5 free passes to a 400-acre recreational area in the city south end. Normally, that would be a $10 entrance fee. And so they're to go out, get out there. Here's 5 passes. Go take a hike.
I like the way you phrase it.
Well, no, that's honestly, I stole that from the CBC headline, to be fair. But I'm sort of like, why did it take us this long to think of this? Because I've never heard of this. I have never heard of this anywhere I have lived. And you just think somewhere like, my doctor's office is, over by Sir John A. So it's right near all these conservation area walkarounds. You'd think they'd be like going, hey, you need to get out more, Dave. Like, get off your butt.
You mean Laurel Heights, right?
Sir John A.?
The school.
Oh.
Yeah. I'm sorry, David. You forgot how woke we got around here for a minute.
I just don't care.
Okay.
I actually believe that the first prime minister of this country, the guy who founded it, who built the railroad, by the way, 2.5 years to build the railroad, Mike.
Oh, don't get me started.
Oh, so seriously, you know what? What we need to do to get big things done in this country? Import Chinese labor and stomp all over Aboriginal rights. That's all we need to do to get big things done again.
And on that note, I'll ask David Drewe to take a hike. Thank you, sir. Drew's Views every Monday morning at 11:30 on the Mike Farwell Show, 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. Well, it is that time on a Monday, the time that you get your rants and or your raves off your chest and onto the air. 60 minutes of open line radio coming up for just that very thing. Your rants and or your raves here on the Mike Farwell Show, 570 News Radio.
Take out the papers and the trash, or you don't get no spending cash. If you don't scrub that kitchen floor, you ain't gonna rock and roll no more. Yakety yak.
Don't talk back.
Just finish cleaning up your room. Let's see that dust fly with that broom. Get all that garbage outside, or you don't go out Friday night. Yakety yak.
Don't talk back.
On Mondays, your Talkback Hour is called Rant or Rave. Rant because you're upset about something. Rave because you're happy about it. We'll hear either of those things, the rants or the raves. Get them off your chest and onto the air at 519-570-2545. Star 570 or 1-800-570-5715. Let's get right into it. Phone lines already lighting up. Preston Paul, start us off. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mike. Yeah, hot enough for you?
I love it, buddy. I love it so much I can't even tell you.
I know. I can't complain because I hate the cold.
Exactly. Me too.
Yeah. So Elvis Presley actually died on August the 16th, 1977.
He did, but when we talked about it during This Week in Music History, he played what turned out to be his last concert.
Yeah. Right, yeah. But then the gentleman had said that he had passed away in July or something.
Oh, I might have missed that. My apologies.
So as a rave, you're talking about Queen. My buddy and I went down and scalped tickets at the Madison Square Gardens. I think it was 81. And we get in there. We're sitting right beside the stage, and they got this great big bank right in front of the stage. We can't see a thing. Queen comes on. These are the brand new laser lights that they used in the concerts back then, and they moved right up out of her way, and they had a ramp where Brian May could just come right up and play right in front of us. It was unbelievable.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, it was pretty cool. Anyways, that's all I got, Mike.
All right, Paul, good to hear from you today.
Thanks.
Take care. Preston Paul, one of our newer listeners to the program and a pretty frequent contributor too. We love it. Hey, there's always room for another voice, you know. We love to hear from you. 519-570-2545, star 570, 1-800-570-5715. We love our new and or first-time callers. Don't be shy. Kyle's never shy. He hasn't been shy a day in his life. Hey, Kyle.
You're right, and I'm not going to be shy about this one. You know what?
What?
It's a huge rant. I went to the Jays game on the weekend. I had a great time at the Jays game. But you know what? Get Doug Ford on the phone. 4 hours. It took me 4 hours just to go from Listowel. I left at 9:30 in the morning to make a 3 o'clock pitch game. 4 hours to get to Listowel from Toronto is pathetic. And I don't know why it's taking so long for the GO Transit to get from Kitchener to Toronto when it takes me, by the time I get to Cambridge, I'm stuck in traffic because there's no other options to get there. You know, if they just put GO Transit, we'd be saving an hour and a half one way to get from Kitchener to Toronto. Even put them in airport, get all day two-way flying from the airport to Toronto for 25, 30 minutes, because it is pathetic that it takes me 4 hours to get from Listowel to Toronto, and then by the time you get to the game, you're pissed off because now you have to wait another 4 hours to get back home. It's a joke, Mike. Get Doug Ford on the phone. You know, he's a politician. Tell him and ask him why there is still no two-day all-way GO Transit going from Kitchener to Toronto and back. Thank you very much, Mike.
All right, Kyle. Doug Ford is there for you. He's going to build the tunnel, remember? And that'll help improve traffic congestion going to Toronto. Couple of things about that. First of all, I'm sure you've heard me mention it before because I agree with this wholeheartedly. I mean, it was years ago, but I remember getting together with buddies. We were headed to Toronto on a Sunday, and we decided, okay, we'll meet at 10:30 at Sports World. It's a Sunday. And we missed the top half of the inning, the first inning. That's how it took us almost 3 hours on a Sunday morning, leaving Kitchener to drive down to Toronto. I am at the point now where I make darn sure that when I'm going there, I really want to get there for whatever it is I'm doing in Toronto. It's really got to be worth it because you just never know. You never know with that traffic. And speaking of Blue Jays games, good friends of ours, we learned this weekend, and this one chafes my chaps. It really chafes my chaps. And I recognize I'm walking that fine line here because I work for a radio station that's owned by Rogers, which owns the Toronto Blue Jays. I don't know how heavily they get into all of these little details. My point being, good friends of ours have invited us annually for many years now to enjoy their club seats in the 200 level at Rogers Centre. It's a really nice place. It's an upgrade, certainly from any seat that we've ever had before. And they do pretty well. They're pretty successful business people here. They share these seats. They get like a quarter of the games or whatever it is. And it's great. You get your own parking spot down below, this and that. Well, they've been informed that this is likely to be their last year because the cost of this is going to triple next year. It'll go 3 times as high as it currently is. And that got me down the rabbit hole of the changes that have been made to the Blue Jays Stadium and how much more expensive it's gotten for people. And people who had long-time seasons tickets are essentially being priced out of where they used to sit. And again, our friends who have these tickets, they do pretty well for themselves. So I guess you have to be like ultra wealthy to afford the really nice seats with all the fancy, all the fanciest ingredients, as the Bare Naked Ladies would have sung. I don't get it. Like, where is the room in sports anymore for the common fan? Please and thank you. And I know this usually applies to the Toronto Maple Leafs, but now I'm looking at it and what's happening at Rogers Centre, and I'm like, well, what the HE double hockey sticks? How do I get to go to a game? And how much is it going to cost me to do that? I'm just an average Joe, but I like baseball. I don't love the direction it's going. I don't love how long it takes me to get there, and I don't love where they're going with the pricing. But that's just me. Your rants and or raves always welcome on this Rant or Rave Hour on the Mike Farwell Show, 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. I love Clinton's email to Mike at 570news.com. I have a solution for Kyle's situation at the Jays game. He has his small aircraft pilot's license. He should have rented a plane and flown into Billy Bishop Airport. He could have saved 3 hours of his time. I love how well our listeners know one another and our regulars. Thanks for that, Clinton. And just on Kyle's point and his frustration with a 4-hour trip from Listowel to Toronto for a Blue Jays game. All day two-way go. I'm starting to think, I don't know why, I'm starting to think it's a pipe dream. I don't know why we get so disrespected in this region. We have 3 members of provincial parliament, 3 in this region who are currently members of the progressive conservative government here in Ontario. Where are they on this? Highway 7, joke. All-day two-way go, joke. And it's been a joke for a long time. We in Waterloo region are the butt of that joke. And I, for one, am frustrated as HE double hockey sticks by. Like I would be standing literally on a soapbox at the train station every day yelling for all-day two-way go. Let's go. Do something for the love of all things holy. All right. Ted, you're on Rant or Rave. Good afternoon.
Well, yeah, thanks for your rant there, but I think that's immaterial to the one that I've got, because I am so disgusted with our Prime Minister Carney and our government to have missed the opportunity in history to have go down as a leader, the Canadian leaders of the countries that are afraid of that guy below the border here that doesn't know that there's a 49th parallel. He thinks the dividing line is an imaginary one. But in any event, I really feel that had we done our part in standing up and announcing to the world that this guy that has multiple felons against him is welcomed by our government into Canada to the meeting out in Banff there, and had it been me, I would have been sending an email to the White House occupant that says if you cross our international line, when that plane stops rolling, we're going to confiscate Air Force One and put you in prison, wherever the closest maximum prison is in Banff there. But I really feel now that if you're a felon, you could come to our CBS and be denied and then say to them, like, well, what a bunch of hypocrisy there when you let this guy in that's got 30-plus felons, and now you turn me away. So,
well, he's got this thing, though, called diplomatic immunity, Ted.
What's that?
He's got this thing called diplomatic immunity.
Well, that's a bunch of crap too, then, But no, I guess I'm. You know what? This is the first time I've called in, and for years when I was sick there, I listened to your show all the time, But then I got away from it, and if I lived tomorrow, I'll be 9 decades plus 1 year old, and I've seen a lot in my lifetime in that, and the hypocrisy of almost absolutely everything now is just sickening. The governments that are making the people fearful that there's going to be a fourth world war or whatever the case may be, and then they trade with one another. And I could remember with Biden saying, if you elect me into the White House, I'm going to shut down that pipeline from Canada. Well, when the crap hit the fan with Ukraine and Putin, guess what bubbled to the surface was that there was a 24/7 convoy of oil freighters running from Russia to the States, and here they cut us off.
All right, Ted, I got to get to some other callers.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Good to hear from you. And hey, don't be a stranger to the show. We love having our 9 decades plus 1 years with us every day. Terry, good afternoon.
Hey, good afternoon, Mike. Listening to Kyle's call, guess where I was on Saturday afternoon?
Toronto?
That's right. I went down there to see the game. I left home at 11 o'clock. Mind you, I took the 401 all the way into the Yorkdale station. And then I had to stop there at a dealership in Mississauga because I needed some service parts for my bike. So I was about a half hour. But it took me a good, to get down to the stadium, it took me a good 4 hours as well. But the thing is that the subway only ran a certain point, and then you had to take a shuttle bus downtown from St. Clair West Station because they were doing service to the subway line. So that took an extra hour. It didn't have to. But yeah, I sympathize with Kyle. And no, I probably won't be going to any more Blue Jay games. The stadium's nice. They did a nice job renovating. But for the trouble you go through to get down there for one game, I'd rather just go west down to Detroit. I know it's it's farther. It's in distance, it's a farther drive, but in time, it's probably shorter. I mean, you got the border to deal with, but that's probably not as bad as dealing with Toronto traffic. So, yeah, I just concur with what That's what Kyle was saying. One more thing about the Jays. I don't know why they play that techno AI retro music between innings. They should bring it back to the old days, Let's bring some Human League and Flock of Seagulls type music, and that's what we need. So just a tip for the Blue Jay brass. Anyway, Mike, have yourself a good day and try to stay a little cool there.
Thanks, Terry. I appreciate it. I guess we'll have to ask all the wealthy investors for seats for Blue Jays games what kind of music they want to listen to. Because, Terry, I don't know if you're not going to games anymore or you can't afford to, your musical preferences might not get taken into account. Rant or Rave continues on the Mike Farwell Show this afternoon, 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. On Mondays, the Talkback Hour is reserved for your rants and or raves. Let's get right back to the phones. Mark, good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mike. I'm going back to Kyle's call.
Sure.
Correct?
Yeah.
Okay. Kyle, if you're listening, come on down to Kitchener. It's a half-hour drive from Listwell. Take in the Kitchener Panther game. It's great baseball. Free parking. $15 a ticket. Barbecue hot dogs. Ice cold beer. You'll love it, Kyle. And save yourself 8 hours of driving.
Mark, that's an excellent idea, and well done by you. I hope they give you a free ticket next time for that promotion. But Mark's not wrong. It is great value to catch some interleague baseball. I know it's not the majors, but what do you want? You want to spend some time at the ballpark? Have a beer and a dog? Watch the great old game? Absolutely. The best thing about baseball is its timeless nature, right? It's not over till somebody records 27 outs. There's no clock on that game. Anyway, Mark is absolutely right. Great value. Get a nice dog off the barbecue and ice cold beer and watch yourself some inter-county baseball. Panthers, by the way, home at Jack Couch Park on Thursday night for their next home game. Francis, good afternoon.
Yeah, we're right on the right subject about Kyle saving time. I thought I had a good idea. We know about these money makers, and there's a great money maker system in Wallenstein where they have you crawling through at 40 clicks. Now, this is Mennonite country. The people around there, Mennonites, they know you got to look left and right, and they learn at a young age. You look around, you're not on an iPhone or anything like that. Put the speed limit at a regular speed limit, and he would save at least 5 minutes there. Now, isn't that a great idea?
I'm all for it, Francis.
Yeah, like come on, on the other way heading back towards Dorking, there's a sign there that says that lights flash. That's when you slow down. Otherwise, drive the normal speed. So at that, we'll say God bless.
God bless you as well, Francis. Always appreciate the calls. I don't think there's a whole lot of support for the 40 kilometer per hour zones. Anybody with me on that? It seems like the support for that is wearing very thin. Jody, good afternoon.
Hi there, Mike. Why don't they start making rechargeable batteries last longer than that last longer than usual? You know, because we're getting into the future, right? So. I don't know. I just called in because I just want to wish everybody a happy summer, and I'm doing okay.
I'm glad to hear it, Jody. And I second that happy summer thing. Is it hot enough for you? As for the rechargeable batteries, we've been saying that since the dawn of rechargeable batteries, right? Even before these lithium-ion suckers came out. I have a battery-operated whippersnipper at home. And let me tell you, the battery on that is pretty much done. But I looked at the new ones, the replacement batteries on the weekend, and it's going to cost me almost as much for the ding-dang battery as it cost me for the ding-dang whippersnipper in the first ding-dang place. Come on with your coming on. Rant or Rave continues on the Mike Farwell Show, 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. On Mondays, we reserve Talkback for your rants and or raves. Rant because you're upset about something. Rave because you're happy and you want to tell everyone. And by everyone, I mean all 44 of our listeners on the show. Let's get right back to the phones. Jason, good afternoon.
Oh, hi, Mike. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. How are you?
Oh, I'm okay. Thanks. I just had a quick comment about the drive to the Blue Jay game.
Sure.
I usually go to Yorkdale Mall, hop on a train, and I'm there in a couple hours.
That's what one of our other listeners had mentioned, but this time around, they had to get off the subway and take a shuttle bus the rest of the way because of some work being done on the line. But I used to do the same thing, Jason. Park at Yorkdale and subway the rest of the way in.
It's worth a $30 ticket if you get caught.
But I've been doing it so long, there didn't used to be a ticket for getting caught. But yes, you're right. They have changed that. They caught on to us.
Yeah.
All right. Well, thanks for the advice. Appreciate it.
Yeah, not a problem. You take care, Mike.
You as well, sir.
Looking forward to the Rangers.
Oh, buddy. You and me both. Let's go. Well, let's enjoy this nice summer first, and then we'll play some hockey, okay?
Perfect.
Attaboy. Talk to you soon.
Take care.
Thanks for the call. It just goes to show you how ridiculous it is to try to get to a place 100 kilometers away when everybody's got a hack, right? Oh, how did you go? What way did you do it? How much time did it take you to do it? That just goes to show you how ridiculous the entire situation is. It's 100 kilometers away. We should be door to door in an hour and a bit. Instead, it took Kyle 4 hours from Listowel on the weekend. Ernie, good afternoon.
Mikey, how's it going?
Hey, buddy, I'm good. How are you?
Good. So, just with Kyle's point there, I've traveled over the AC North, Cleveland, Cincy, the black and yellow team, and then obviously we go see our beloved Ravens every once in a while with the drives and everything.
Sure.
So Baltimore's 9, Cleveland's I think 5. The P team that you like, I think that's around 5 too.
It is.
It's free travel. Other than the border, you are not I was driving with my brothers and we went to Baltimore this year, and he's like, we did not get stuck in traffic until we hit Baltimore. Other than the border, going through Buffalo a little bit, but you're smooth sailing. Yeah, it's a longer drive, but before Toronto, if you want to go, I got to plan a therapist appointment. I got to do some woo-saw lessons with me, before I get up and go, because like Kyle said, you're going to get so angry if you don't. You have to almost expect that. And that's what's so sad. We got to improve that. I would be going to Jays games, but do I want to go when I'm sitting in the car for 4 hours with kids and just losing my marbles by the time I get there, Mike?
It's a great point, Ernie. You're absolutely right. We have to improve this.
Come on. So that's where just going to quick side note here. One time my buddy, we had a guys weekend. We went to Godrich, and it's got a cottage on the beach, and I'm so thankful he lent it to us. But we bunch of guys with kids in their 40s, tarps off, and we're hitting baseballs on the beach. Mike, life couldn't have gotten better. And that drive from here to there, it's a smooth sailing, and it's such a peaceful drive, Mike. It's such a beautiful drive, just going out that way instead of going the other way. I call it that's like the devil's way, going the other way. You know what I mean, Mike? But
Couldn't
anyway,
agree more.
Mike, have a good one. Thanks.
Good to hear from you, Ernie. Thank you for that. Not my last time. My last time when I was commuting to Toronto was for the early morning show at the Fan, and I would just use the 401 because then at least, I was leaving Kitchener about 3:15 a.m. Not a lot in the way of traffic. But prior to that, when I was commuting to the big city, I would take a back way. Well, I was going north of Toronto, to be honest with you, but I was going a back way. Even though it took longer, at least I could consistently make it in the hour 15, hour 20 it would take me to get there. And you moved, and the scenery was nicer, just like Ernie's talking about those trips to the States. We did Pittsburgh a couple of few summers ago, whenever it was, 4.5, 5-ish hours, whatever it was. And Ernie's right. It's so peaceful. It's a longer way. But unless you're in the core of the city, you're not stuck in all of the nonsense. You basically leave Kitchener and you might as well get ready to start slowing down at Town Line Road when you're headed east. It's just, it's mind-numbing. And I'm with Ernie. You have to prepare yourself for something like that. Andre, you're on Rant or Rave. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Mike. So, as I was traveling in my head here, I remember you a long time ago, you said that you would prefer a train in the middle of the highway. And I would really love that if it's true, because there was rumors before the election that they would put this fast train. I would love it to go to Quebec so we can have the Nordiques back. That would be, because I really like what Jersey Bill said. Mike, when I came blind, the sports was eliminated. My heart was bleeding, and with you, through your eyes and your mouth and all that on the ice, I hope you don't go to Toronto for the Maple Leaf, because you're amazing at it. You're very passionate. But to my point, Mike, is with Jersey Bill, he said there should be a different division, like East, West, and in the States, because we can do Nordiques, Montreal, we can do Ottawa, Toronto, we can do Edmonton, Calgary, and then
what about Winnipeg and Vancouver?
Well, they gotta join, or they gotta create more. Vancouver can do it. Vancouver could do it, right? I think it's good to have more, and then we bring the real competition of North and South, something like that, right? But that's my flaws. And another last thing, Mike, thank you, is Devin Robinson. Congratulations. You were part of my resolution last year when I said you would make it out there. I'm very proud of you, young man. Take care, Mike.
All right, Andre, thank you. Devin Robertson, who often is on the other side of the glass as our board operator on this show. So when you call in, you'd talk to Devin, and now you hear him reading the news updates during the show today. Andre says that's a sure sign that the young man has made it. Good job by you, Dev. And to Andre's point about the train, I confess to having borrowed the idea of the train right down the middle of the 401 from Brian Burke when he was on this radio station and talking about things that we need. Look, the track is running parallel to the 401 anyway. Why we can't get this done is, I'm sorry, beyond my comprehension. I hear all of the, frankly, excuses. Well, we have to buy this track. This isn't ready for electrification, this and that, the other. Do you want to do something that improves things? Do you want to make lives better for Ontarians, for Canadians? And to Andre's point, how about that high-speed rail line from the Quebec border to Windsor? For how many years have we been talking about it? And here we are. We're just talking and then sitting in traffic for 4 hours on a Saturday just to get to Toronto. It's ridiculous. Rant or Rave continues. We got a first-time caller on the line coming up, and then there's room for you, too, on the Mike Farwell Show, 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. On Mondays, the Talkback Hour is for your rants and or your raves. Rant because you're upset about something. Rave because you are happy and you want others to know it. 519-570-2545, star 570, 1-800-570-5715. If you're happy and you know it, answer the phone. Joel is a first-time caller with us this afternoon. Hello, Joel.
Hi, Mike. How are you today?
I'm excellent, thank you. How are you?
I'm doing good, thanks.
Good.
I guess I'm calling with a rant. I wouldn't say it's because I'm upset, but more disappointed. I'm a longtime listener, and I keep meaning to call about this, and I thought today I would. So a couple years back, we were sent a survey in Waterloo to find out what we thought about having backyard fires. And I remember filling out this survey, taking the time, answering all the questions and so on, and then finally getting some feedback from the region saying despite positive, despite the overall survey results being in favor, they weren't going to proceed with it. And I didn't understand it. I guess it disappointed me because, if the region's going to come and ask you for some feedback and the majority of the folks seem to think it would be a good idea to allow backyard fires and then they don't proceed, it just kind of, to me, it just, like, why bother asking for a survey if you're not gonna try to action those items? So that was it. I just wanted to call and mention that because they've sent me follow-up surveys, and I haven't bothered filling them out because I'm like, this is a waste of my time.
Yeah, that's a really interesting point. Out of curiosity, Joel, have you had a backyard fire despite the ban in the city?
I haven't. Okay. I do have a smoker, though, which is ironic that they allow you to have a pellet smoker, which does cause smoke, but you're not allowed to have a small fire pit or something like that. And I think the main reasons they had said is because of, odors and potential smoke going into your neighbors' backyards being like the key thing. I don't believe it was related to safety. It was more of a bothering your neighbors kind of reason why we weren't going ahead with it.
Yep, and listen, I'm with you on that. I think Waterloo got it way wrong on the whole backyard fire thing, but here we are. Appreciate you calling in and sharing that. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Thanks.
Good to hear from a first-time caller like Joel. And what an interesting outcome, right? Because I recall those survey results as well as Joel does. And the survey results did show that the majority of respondents were in favor of allowing backyard fires in Waterloo. And now when Joel gets the opportunity to participate in a survey for the city, he opts not to participate because he figures, what's the point? Why am I putting my time into this? And look, we've talked about this on the show before too. Just because you get a chance to have your say doesn't mean you're ultimately going to get your way. But in this case, where there was a majority, if the residents surveyed, for example, made up council, then backyard fires would have been allowed because more said yes than said no. That's exactly how it works on council. And there were all kinds of issues brought up, including the environmental concern. My goodness gracious, if we're talking about the particles from a backyard fire being a tremendous impact on our climate-related goals, I don't know. And I still think the ultimate troll, and I know it's not a wood fire, a wood-burning fire pit, but come on. They do these campfire events in the Uptown Square in the summertime, and they're doing them again this summer. So in the city where council has said thou shalt not have a backyard fire of one's own to enjoy a nice summer night outdoors, maybe invite the neighbors over, sit around the fire, tell stories, maybe play a few songs, whatever the case may be. You can't do that. But you know what? We'll give you a fire. We'll do a fire for you, and then you can come and gather around our fire in the Uptown Square. Like, it's almost the very definition of nanny state here. My goodness gracious. Anyway, I didn't agree with it then. I still don't agree with it today. I'm not in the habit of encouraging civil disobedience, but I'd light my own ding-dang backyard fire. Go ahead. Give me an infraction. If a neighbor complains and somebody gets there before I've safely extinguished my backyard fire, because I'm an adult and I will take good care of the property that I pay taxes on, and all I want to do is have a backyard fire in the nice weather. I feel bad for you, Joel. You know what you could do? Come out over here to Kitchener where we let you have backyard fires. Oh, it's good living in Kitch, let me tell you. It's Rant or Rave on your Mike Farwell Show, 570 News Radio and Rogers TV. Final minutes together for our show today before we turn things over to Rob Snow. And Now You Know, that'll go until 3. And then it's all news afternoons with Aaron Anderson and Paul McPhee. If you want to be a part of Rant or Rave, you do that with a call to 519-570-2545, star 570, or 1-800-570-5715. One of the stories we talked about early today was that weekend shooting in the Stanley Park area of Kitchener. And I don't know if you've been following it through the day, but a little bit more information has come out from regional police since. The investigation continues. 3 suspects remain at large, but the shooting happened when there was a break-in at the home in the Stanley Park area of Kitchener. The homeowner confronted the people breaking in. Turns out they were known to one another. Shots were fired. The suspects take off. The homeowner follows. And that's when more shots were fired on the expressway in and around the Wellington Street ramp. Minor injuries to 2 people, not life-threatening. Again, suspects remain at large. But it just made me think of our conversations last week around the Castle Law and how interested we seemed to be in our informal, unscientific survey here on the show. Interested we seemed to be in the idea of a law that allows us, even with lethal force, to protect our homes, our property, the people within them. And this is an example of how it can go the other way if that other person has a gun. I don't know what we want to get into here, but it ain't the wild, wild west. But that's a really unfortunate outcome, and it'll be interesting to see where this investigation leads. Let's get back to the phones. Jacqueline, good afternoon.
Hi, Mike. How are you?
Hey, Jax, I'm great. How are you?
I'm doing so good, but unfortunately, I have a rant, and I hate ranting because it's just, I don't like to rant. I prefer to rave, but I think you know what I'm going to rant about.
I do. Service dogs.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. So one of my clients, and this is just something that people need to bear in mind, one of my clients who's trying her damnedest to get back into society, back into gaining her independence. She's trying to look for a job. She has 3 diplomas in administration in the Niagara region, and she applied for a job. And the actual rejection letter said that we are rejecting your application because you have a service dog. And what people don't realize is that that is actually against the law, and that, a service dog, I understand that there are people that have allergies, but then the company should make it so that she can be in a separate office. And our service dogs are trained not to interact with other people. So it's not like this dog is going to be running around riot. It's there for her, but also it's a medical device. So saying that you can't bring your service dog to work is like saying you're not able to walk, but you cannot bring your cane or wheelchair into a public space. So it's very, very sad that we're having to deal with this.
Jacqueline, thanks for sharing that. We got to run to get to the news center, but really appreciate you bringing that to light.
Wonderful. Take care.
You as well. Jacqueline Gorey runs the excellent charity Partners with Paws that helps connect people to the service animals that they need. And yes, Jacqueline's absolutely right that discriminating against one's service dog is against the human rights here in Ontario. All right, I'm going to get you to that 570 News Center for the update, and then Now You Know with Rob Snow coming up until 3.